Hello everyone, Discord here and welcome back to another Planet Zoo quick tricks tutorial, and today I'll be showing you how to make a natural path out of any path in the game. Now of course the game already has a bunch of natural paths like the one from the Aquatic DLC, the Australia DLC and the two from the base game, but perhaps you don't want logs or planks or strings, you want a big wooden thing or a stone curb or maybe a darker wooden one. Sadly, this trick does not let you make curbless paths, but it still might be useful to some people. So, if you watched my tutorial on how to hide the animal talk points, you might have an idea of how this trick works. In that tutorial, we used underground paths to put the talk points underground as well, and this trick uses those same underground paths. So, to make it work, you have to go to your settings, camera, and make sure to scroll all the way down and disable camera collision with terrain. Just check that over there. And you also have to go to your paths and make sure you have flattened terrain enabled, and make sure that tunneling is disabled as well if you happen to have that enabled. So once again, flattening terrain should be enabled and tunneling should be disabled. Then, because we set that camera setting in our settings, we are able to go underground, and if you go underground and while looking up at where the surface would normally be, you hold shift and you move slightly downward, place the path, and now you have a path that is slightly underground. Now sadly, if you branch off from this path, it does kind of mess up the entire terrain, so if you want to make a longer path, you're going to have to keep adding little knobs. So you hold control to not attach to that path anymore, hold down shift, move it down slightly again, and then again press control, move down slightly, etc, etc, and now you have several knobs of path, and you can kind of join those up together to get a longer path. Now I recommend before you start placing your path, you lay it out with something like art shapes, so you kind of know, hey, I want a path that goes like that. Then when you start putting down your path and you go underground, you can see those little art shapes that you put, so you know where you have to put each of your paths, and then you can start connecting it up after that. And something you should also pay attention to when you are placing these, you really only want to go down a very tiny amount, because if you go down more than that, you'll see that there's a large distance between the floor and the path. And if we just grab a guest or a mechanic, that works too, you'll see that the one where we only went down a little bit is just standing on the terrain as normal, whereas the guests have completely sunken into the ground. What's also interesting to note here is that the reason this doesn't allow you to make curbless paths is the fact that the curb for some reason always jumps to the top of the terrain. So that's why it's not possible to hide that curb in the terrain. So yeah, make sure you only go down a little bit. Now, if you want to connect this path up to a regular path, you're going to want to make sure that you disable flattened terrain again, and it will go up a little bit on one of them, but that's just the way things are. The reason you want to disable flattened terrain is because of what we saw earlier. If you don't disable it, it's going to mess up the path like it does over there. So just make sure that you have that disabled, and then you can kind of just connect it up to your main path. But that is all there is to it. I should also note that it is incredibly difficult, I would almost say impossible, to make this trick work on like non-flat terrain or on slopes. So let's say we have a little, it is possible to put down a path underneath over here, but you can already see that we have it kind of sticking out a little bit, so I'm going to put another one here. So yeah, it's incredibly difficult to get that to work properly. You will have bits kind of starting to show up like that, and also of course the guest's legs will be sticking into the ground wherever it's not perfectly underneath it. So yeah, it's really hard to get that right. So yeah, it works best on completely flat terrain, so that is another limitation of it. So yeah, it is a bit of a limiting trick, but it might still be useful to someone. So I thought it was worth sharing, but that is really all there is to it. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video stream or whatever comes first. Bye bye.